John, Gabe, tell us about the temper and the temperament of Americans now there in the U.S. With all these. Of course, a lot of these are not exactly new. I mean, some of these meron tayong idea beforehand pa, before they were announced. But now they're going to be talagang policy. Di ba? Iba kasi minsan ang pangako, iba minsan yung gagawin eh. And now it looks like it's headed that way. So what's the
Ginawa
temper
na.
there now? Mukha bang this is a surprise for anybody, or it's not a surprise anymore and it's already expected?
Yeah, on our terms, I think na talagang pinagtayuan talaga ni President Trump ang kanyang statement na promises made, promises kept. This is kind of the same thing that he did in 2016, 2017. Not as much more executive orders as he did in his first term, in his first day then, compared now. Kasi ngayon mas seasoned na talaga, tsaka mas aggressive ang policies ni Trump when it comes to all of the executive orders he signed today. So he's just following through the campaign promises. So yan pong nagpapasaya sa mga base ngayon, sa mga Republican Party, dahil nakakita sila ngayon ng kandidato na yung mga sinasabi niya sa kampanya, natupad niya or tinutupad niya sa first day pa lang with a stroke of a pen. So today was a very optimistic day when it comes to the Republican voters and the voters that did vote for President Trump. And I think we're all very optimistic and looking forward to what President Trump is going to do in the first 100 days. But you can see a president that's ready to get to work right away, compared to what he had to deal with in his first term. Sa mga appointments, sa mga upcoming, he's trying to figure out who's on his good side, kung sino ba talagang hindi. Pero ngayon, talagang mas controlled siya. You can see that there's not a lot of more stories when it comes to his chief of staff or anything like that. They got to work on day one.
Gabe, what about you? From your end naman.
Yep, so before, whenever I come on the show, I'd always be sporting my normal blue colors, my blue blazer, but for me as a Democrat and for a lot of us, we're wearing black today because it is the funeral of our hopes and dreams for the next 4 years. And so we are in mourning right now. President Trump talked a lot about ushering in a golden age of America with American exceptionalism, power to stop all the wars, and the spirit of unity, but we on the Democrat side don't feel that unity. Instead, we feel more divided than ever, especially with the slew of executive orders being rescinded and eventually executive orders being signed. Today was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and to see such a phenomenal civil rights leader's words twisted, from talking about I have a dream to have all the people at the table, but then talk about points that aren't common wins, let's say, that both Democrats and Republicans can agree on, but instead talk about one-sided issues that instead alienate the other side, such as us Democrats. It makes us feel, again, our hopes and dreams are dying whenever we talk about, for example, diversity, equity, and inclusion in government, education, immigration, climate change, trade, and just the economy in general. Or even when he's talking about taking back the Panama Canal after we already gave it to an entire country, let alone after building it on stolen land. It doesn't make us feel good in terms of how do we be a better neighbor for other countries out there and be the America that we wanted to be known as. And so, honestly, again, very scared, and so just mourning right now.
Well, for Filipinos, one of the biggest concerns is, of course, yung citizenship. A lot of us have relatives in the U.S. They are there on birthright citizenship. They are not TNT. They are citizens based on birthright. What's the impact? You think this will actually push through? Because we
Yes.
are expecting legal challenges, right?
Yes, I 100% actually expect it to push through, and that makes it really scary for us because for me, for example, I know a lot of people, especially when we're talking about immigration and the H-1B visa and the J-1 visa, whose families get these visas to come to the U.S. to work, hoping to immigrate eventually and then have their kids here and sort of use them as anchor babies of sorts to eventually transition their lives from their kids having birthright citizenship and then eventually getting the entire family citizenship through petitioning it, sort of just finding another way to make immigration a reality. Mind also, for those who are unaware, despite them being undocumented and being on visas, they still pay into our tax system through the individual tax identification numbers. So it's not as if they are, I'd say, leeching off of our benefits of being citizens, but they are paying into the system as well. However, where I see this actually playing through for birthright citizenship is states and civil liberties unions such as the ACLU will challenge it in court. And unfortunately right now, a majority of the justices on the Supreme Court have been appointed by Donald Trump in his first term, minus Chief Justice Roberts, who was appointed by George Bush. And so therefore there's a majority on the Supreme Court right now. And so if a challenge eventually gets elevated to the court, the fear and the probability that the court will side with President Trump in ending birthright citizenship, because there is a precedent despite previous case law from United States v. Wong Kim Ark that states that birthright citizenship is legal, is a very much a possibility to overturn that case law and eventually allow it to become law. The third part of that is Republicans control both the House and the Senate. And so while it is a slim majority within the Senate and Democrats can try to filibuster, Democrats right now aren't united on immigration issues themselves, nor birthright citizenship. Bernie Sanders actually came out in support of ending the H-1B visa as well. And so there's a real fear that, again, our own communities, but communities across the country who, A, rely on birthright citizenship for immigration processes, but B, also just normal everyday citizens who are born in the United States getting citizenship as well, is going to create a new legal process and challenge that needs to be unfolded in the Trump administration.
Ikaw dyan, may mga relatives ka ba dyan na mga birthright citizens?
Yes, po. I have some distant more relatives that are in that, but I haven't gotten a chance to really dissect more of that. But I am expecting some more legal challenges as well. I do think that he did this, because it is part of the immigration mandate that the voters have gone for him, and he's just blanketing it almost like, Biden blankets pardons, and he's just trying to figure out how he can blanket on an immigration policy that can be pushed through the House or in the Senate as well, and make sure that it gets through the Supreme Court. But the thing that we have to think about here the most is he is trying to do what he promised on the campaign stump. And so, kung ikaw ang botante, tapos ikaw naghahanap ng kandidato na hindi nakikinig sa'yo or administration na hindi nakikinig sa'yo in 4 years, tapos narinig mo tong nangyari sa first day pa lang niya, yun ang makikita mong parang optimism na, talagang tinutupad niya yung mga sinasabi niya, hindi lang siya nagche-cheche-poreche. And so, ito yung parang ginagawa niya mula nung 2016, 2017 as well. So, we'll see where it goes.
John,
there were a lot of his executive orders as well that in the first term that was challenged. But, I'm optimistic that either way, and to Gabe's point, like the Democrats are still split on this. So I think this would have a better solution that would come up from both the Republicans and the Democrats, but it's something to be looked at because President Trump is seeing that in some cases, not maybe in the Filipino-American case, but in some of the races or nationalities might be taking advantage more of this into milking the system, as we can call it sometimes. So these are some things that, that he's gotten some from his local government folks that are really dealing with this matter. So I think that that's why he put this forward, and we'll see where it goes.
Pero dyan, iba yung binabanatan ni Trump before na about dun sa mga criminals, rapists, drug lords na pumapasok sa borders ng US, no? Even Chinese, no? Na pumapasok sa borders ng US. Iba yung birthright citizens. These are not criminals. No? These are not hindi to mga kwan, no? Hindi to mga unwanted na mga kwan, no? Marami sa mga yan ay merong mga productive relatives, etc., etc. So medyo iba yan, ha? Doon sa kanyang laging pinupuntirya.
But he also did executive orders, making sure that we send back and deport those criminals and the folks that have high records, and that's his priority. So I understand the birthright citizenship is a big talking point right now. But from what you've heard him say in the stump, and from what he's talked with incoming Secretary Homan, he's going to be focusing on the criminal cases first, and the ones that have records, and the gang members. And you heard him talk about them, and then he talked about also, naming the cartels as a foreign terrorist organization. So it was all part of all of that. Part of those 70 plus orders. That he did.
What about the pardons that Trump signed of 1,500 people involved in the January 6th activity or event? I know that of course, the president does have the authority to pardon people. We had Joe Biden pardoning his own son, which also smacks of, I suppose it smacks of conflict of interest. But then again, in pardoning those who were involved in the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021, does that not send a dangerous message for future uprisings?
I mean, what he talked about, I think they're going to distinguish what type of pardons he will have. Were they the non-violent offenders, or were they the I think that's what he was focusing towards on. Yung po yung mga nag-trespass man, or yung mga ganon na nakulong na. Yun yung, I think, napapardon niya. Pero I'm sure that if there were folks that were, convicted as violent offenders, I don't think those were part of the list. But I'd also like to include, not only did President Biden pardon his son, but he swept in the last minutes before President Trump's inauguration a blanket pardon for his family. For 10 years of crimes is going to set a dangerous precedent, to future presidents as well to do that. So those are some of the things that I know that 1,500 pardons sound good, but think about what Joe Biden has done for pardons in the last 2 weeks, that even Democrats in his own party have really been disappointed with those pardons.
John, what does a national emergency entail? Will it allow the President of the United States to call the military to drive away immigrants? Is that what it means?
And I think from what he mentioned on that national emergency, it was to bring the troops into the southern border to help the border patrol folks to navigate the entrances of in the wall area, right? So I think by him doing that is a message, a signal sent to the folks that the border is going to be closed. There's not going to be any more open borders. I mean, the CBP One app, it has been stopped from 12 o'clock this afternoon, meaning folks can't just come into the United States and then set an appointment or set their asylum status. They're going to go through the legal process now, or even the Remain in Mexico policy that Democrats and Republicans have been together on, and some of those policies, right? So I think that's an important issue, that it's a message that, the Panama Canal, that is a message sent straight to Beijing. As much as you might think that he's going to take this, he set those premiers in the back just so that they can hear it. It's not to take back Panama. It's to counter China's developments, and the majority of their operations are controlled by Chinese in Panama Canal. So I think he's shifting that conversation to expose what's happening down there, so people can talk about it more and understand what China's been actually doing in different parts of the world.
Is his suspension of the ban on TikTok, giving it a grace period for 75 days, is that also a message to Beijing? Yung imbitasyon niya doon sa
I think so too. I mean, before he released that, he had a call with President Xi Jinping 2 days ago, right? And so I think that was some of the things that they talked about. So I'm sure, he's talked about, a moratorium for the order. And I think that, with the Supreme Court ruling, I think that's what they're going to go try to find a compromise on, and how they can sell TikTok or get rid of the ByteDance influence within TikTok, and make sure that it's an American-owned company if it does come back to the United States. So I'm optimistic about what could happen there. I personally don't use TikTok, but I think it's and I understand that millions of Americans do see the economic opportunities in this. So I think with President Trump being a negotiator and a deal maker, he's going to make something happen to keep folks happy. But I'm sure the Democrats are going to be happy about that because it's upsetting a lot of Republicans now that he's even considering doing this.
Tibo.
Well,
Sige.
I think one of the most amazing things dito sa inauguration ay yung statement niya ni President Trump na there are only two genders, male and female. In this modern day and age, when even the Catholic Church is opening up its arms in terms of inclusivity, parang medyo weird yung statement na yon, na there are only two genders, male and female. What was that about, John?
You've heard him, deal with this in the whole campaign. I think he's talking about the science when it comes to this, right? And the chromosomes XX and XY, and those are what he's been going off on his stump speeches. And like I said, he's just following through the campaign promises he made to the American voters. And he's doing this in terms of also the two genders when it comes to the sports issue, right? Making sure that the transgenders, they are people. I get it. They're part of. They're taxpayers. They're impactful members of the community. However, the concerns that President Trump has listened to are the concerns of the parents as well that have to deal with the sports issue when they're letting transgender folks play in the female sports, right? So a lot of those folks are talking about how that's not actually a feminist thing because you're taking away an opportunity from somebody. And so at the end of that, I think President Trump understood and listened to the parents' concerns when it comes to this issue when they're dealing with it in local public schools as well. So I think that, when it comes to this issue, it is very divisive in modern day America, but it is something that he is following through again in his campaign promise to follow and give the rights back to the parents when it comes to their education, their kids, whatever they're being exposed to in their schools. So that is what he's bringing back to it as well. I mean, he's a conservative, right? So this is a natural kind of thing for him into believing into the suggestions of also his folks that are probably advising him on this too.
But even
But
the
like last
Republican
game-
Party has gay Republicans, right?
Correct.
Yeah, would you have an organization there about gay and the
Law-abiding
lesbian?
Republicans,
Yeah.
yes.
Gabriel, how are is your group getting any reaction from the LGBTQ community to this measure? Because it will also affect our LGBTQ members in government, right? And
Yes,
in
absolutely.
workforce and the private workforce.
Yes, absolutely. So, when I was in the Biden-Harris administration, I primarily worked in the Health and Human Services Agency. And so, one of the major things that we focused on in Health and Human Services was transgender healthcare or queer healthcare, especially on the mental health side, the transitional side, and then also just care for the whole person as well. And so while I will address, John is totally correct, there is a cultural issue in terms of how are parents being supported in educating their kids, but then over on the HHS side, on the Democrats coalition, what we were trying to advocate for and that we're really scared of now is that a lot of that funding that is going towards the research, towards transitional healthcare, the mental health resources such as therapy for those, or even just the gender affirming care for people who want to transition from whatnot. Because while totally understandable that parents really want to make sure that their kids feel comfortable, or even that all kids are given an equal opportunity in sports and whatnot, at the same time we're focusing on the kid too instead of just the parents. How does the kid feel? Does the kid feel safe to express themselves? And if not, if they express themselves, are they safe at school, or are they going to get bullied by transphobic and homophobic comments as well? And so by defining it only as two by transitioning the conversation from two sexes into two legal genders, it eliminates and invalidates the experience of that child and of that person, which has shown a positive correlation in this case of transphobic and homophobic hate crimes and hate incidences. And so it is very scary for our trans community. And so we as Democrats need to figure out how to challenge this and make sure that our kids are feeling supported, but then also in John's case too, that the parents are being supported as well in supporting their kids and in having equal opportunities to access in sports and whatnot, and also safety in the locker rooms and for future opportunities in wherever they want to make sure that their kids are safe, not just because of who's around, but to avoid sexual assault in those cases too,
Okay.
Out of fear of uncomfortable situation.
What Trump likes to call the restoring sanity agenda. What would this look like on the ground? When you put the boots on the ground, in effect, what are we going to see once these policies take effect? And number two, will there be possible legal challenges to these orders?
Yeah, I think just to answer your question there, I think the first part, the implementation part is going to depend on the agency that it falls upon after being confirmed, Senate confirmed for these cabinet secretaries. They're going to be in full force coming in. So right now, you're going to hear a lot more folks once they get confirmed. Like, for example, you saw Marco Rubio got confirmed. They're going to have their landing teams go in the State Department, and they're going to start trying to navigate these policies into the realities for President Trump. And number two, to answer your question, are there going to be illegal challenges? Absolutely. I don't expect anything less from the Democratic Party to do that and to fight through the checks and balances of what America has to offer when it comes into the House and to the legislative and the executive branch as well. So to answer that question, I do think there's going to be legal challenges in all of these. And similarly, that's what happened in his first term as well.
Mm-hmm. Gabe, what about you? When the boots hit the ground, how is this going to look? When the government finally says you're only male or female?
Definitely. So +1 with John there. It really depends on what Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s policies are if he gets confirmed. I know it is pretty shaky on his confirmation because of his anti-vax standpoint and then also not fully believing in labels and fast food and whatnot. But beyond that, what that would look like if he gets confirmed and once the appointees are confirmed within Health and Human Services and just across the government, here's where I see it play out in the different departments. Firstly, starting in my old home agency, Health and Human Services, cuts to funding for gender-affirming care, mental health care, and also trans care research. And so with all of these cuts in fundings, they're going to be reallocated elsewhere. And what's important about noting all of this funding is these fundings mostly go into grants that eventually go into states or community-based health organizations or in hospitals across the country that do set care. So eventually if someone would need to get the health care they need, whether that be the medicine they need when they're feeling depressed because of their lack of gender affirmation, then they'll have a harder time in getting it, and therefore having to navigate the healthcare law around that would put more of a strain on their financial well-being and may even lead to dangers down the line. Now, switching that over, I mentioned bullying earlier, and that's been a huge thing on the Democrat side in combating transphobia and homophobia, especially that suicide rates amongst queer and transgender populations are really high. And so the Department of Education's Title IX Act in ensuring equal opportunity for all does exactly just that, in promoting the civil rights, but also the genders that people choose to express themselves with. And while Title IX was also created to ensure more diversity within sports and equal opportunity within schools as well, by explicitly labeling it as you can only be male or female, for those who will check the other box or will check not identifying with both, it will create those legal challenges and eventually also funding challenges for the schools that were created to provide gender affirming care as well. Since schools usually get for their own health centers, the funding to the Department of Education, and not just Health and Human Services. And so those, I'd say, probably are going to be the two most impacted ones. Probably another agency would be the Department of Labor, and just helping folks who want to express themselves in the workplace and wanting to make sure they're not facing discrimination, and also the armed services as well, for those who don't fit in with either uniform standard for male and female. So it's going to be across the board, but it's mostly those four agencies.
John, you mentioned China. We're getting mixed signals from President Trump on China. On one hand, he has several cabinet members who are known to be hawkish on China. But on the other, he has broken tradition and invited President Xi Jinping to his inauguration, although, of course, Xi didn't show up. But how do you explain this?
I think Tita, I mean, sorry, I called you Tita again and I got on that last time, but Amy.
There you go.
Alam niyo po, I think he does that to really send a message to Beijing, right? And necessarily, you saw that he's fighting China hard in a lot of these things. And I think having them there is a direct message coming from President Trump to relay it to Beijing that this is not Joe Biden anymore. This is Donald Trump, and he's going to command respect, and he's going to command the United States into a stronger position when it comes to this, rather than a commander-in-chief that we used to have with Joe Biden that was not respected in the global stage as a strong man or as a leader that can follow through this. So that's why I think, referring back to the Panama Canal situation, that's part of it. That's more about China not taking control of the Panama Canal and treating the American cargo ships fair as well. And so as an American who voted for President Trump, who's seen other countries have walked over America's prestige and reputation, this is him commanding it back. And you've seen some symbolic moves as well, not only the China move, but calling the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, changing back Nolly to Mount McKinley. He's trying to restore that American fortitude that he believes is what the country is needing right now. So I do believe that he's just trying to bring his American carnage back into the forefront and making sure that the world leaders know that he's not here to play, and he's here to not be predictable either, but to command a presence in the world stage.
But is part of that that narrative just narrative, or is Trump willing, for example, to invade Panama to get the Panama Canal? Is he prepared to invade Greenland, to take over Greenland, or is it just rhetoric?
How much is bluff? How much is?
I think he's, like I said, he's a deal maker, right? How is he? He's a real estate mogul. How is he? He understands how to bring down the value of one country by attacking them and making sure that his base is stronger based off of that. But the reality of this is, not a lot of people have been talking about how much China has taken over control of the Panama Canal until he started bringing that conversation to the forefront. And now people are seeing, oh, wow, Americans are getting treated very unfairly in the Panama Canal, and Panama is giving so much more favor to the Chinese. And so not only that, in Greenland as well, it's all in these water shapes, in these waterways as well, in the shipping lines. And so I think that, President Trump is becoming unpredictable when it comes to this, but we don't want I'd rather have somebody in Beijing trying to be confused about what possible ways he's doing, rather than knowing right away what the next moves are, like what we saw from Joe Biden. So I think that, he's, and like what I said last week when I was there, like what he was talking about in Canada, he's trolling in some of this as well, right? So that is part of his personality and what he's trying to do. But I'm closely more on the rhetoric side when it comes to this, because if he's talking about invading and this, that's not going to be popular with the rest of the American population. And for you to invade something, it has to have approval within Congress. And with the split in Congress right now, the reality of that is very slim, right?
Mm-hmm. But John, isn't it also dangerous to be trolling, or to be
That's just for Justin Trudeau.
To confuse, for
Personally,
example,
I think.
to confuse states that have nuclear weapons. Isn't there also some danger there when you try to confuse? I know what you mean. He's a deal maker. He's a negotiator. He's a tough one, obviously. But when you bluff and bluster, and you're dealing with somebody who's got nuclear weapons as well, then the equation is not always as clear.
Yeah, no, I understand, and we'll see where this goes. But the important part is like he's bringing back that American first mentality into what that that's what he's been campaigning on. That's what he's been running on since 2016. And so, am I surprised about this? Not really, because this is one of the things that President Trump has been talking about since he got elected, right? And so, but if we kind of unfold it a little bit, we have to talk about and he's exposing all the things like China's doing wrong, and I think somebody's got to fight them back. And if he's the guy that's got to do it, then we're all for it. And because we're tired of being taken advantage of in China, and China's taken a lot of advancements in the past few years, especially with President Joe Biden being on top of the office. And so I'd like for him to start talking about, West Philippine Sea and making sure that he's protecting us when it comes to that as well. And I think, all indications are pointing that mutual defense treaty is still going to be very, very ironclad as well.
Gabriel, what's next for the Democrats, seeing what's happening on the first day of the new Trump administration?
So definitely on the Democrat side, especially on the caucuses. So for the Black Congressional Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, and the Asian Caucus, everyone is pushing back against all of Trump's executive orders. And so most of those caucuses are made up of Democrats, although they do invite Republican members to be a part of it. Republican members tend to not join the caucuses. And so Democrats currently right now, although they did kind of throw the towel in with Marco Rubio, and as we all heard, it was a unanimous confirmation, are trying to reorganize and re-strategize right now, especially after our huge defeat in November. And so right now, the Democratic Party is having their upcoming elections for party leadership. So party chair Jamie Harrison is stepping down, leading to both the chair position and the vice chair position being open. And so there is a big conversation going on right now. So last time we were here, we were talking about if Kamala won, was it a good idea to even have the Chinese in our pocket? And that is one side of the Democratic strategizing party, where they are saying that we should be a bigger party, include more moderate people. However, there is my generation, the Gen Z youth generation, who wants to see the Democratic Party own up its leftism, move fully to the left, and just embrace more social liberally and fiscally liberal ideals. And so that is a conversation that is going to be seen at the voting boxes for the Democratic Party. And so each state is currently running different candidates right now. I know a few people who are running, and a lot of them are youth, because a lot of youth and my generation are sad with what we're seeing. And going back to the voter turnout data as well, they're the same voters who did vote for Biden, but ended up not voting for Harris at the end. And so all in all, Democrats just need to decide, are we going to keep a bigger tent, or are we going to narrow down and actually stand up for values, even if that means biting the hands that feed us?